Hello, good to be with you. This is Joshua Farris from Soul Science Ministries. I want to come to you and talk about a few things related to um, the soul, as is fitting for Soul Science Ministries. And we're going to talk about a wide variety of issues related to the soul. And um, the soul talk today isn't the most, I guess, exciting topic in recent discussions, apologetical discussions, as well as theological discussions, philosophical discussions. It has some interest. There is some interest in it. There is some um, draw to it, but it's not in and of itself, for whatever reason, for some reason, it's not the hot topic of the day. But I want to talk to you about a broader set of issues around the soul and why it is that the soul is so important. Not just that we kind of believe that there is this weird ethereal sort of immaterial thing, but that the meaning and the purpose, the nature and the destiny of the soul itself has so many different relationships and applications and implications for so many aspects of life that so many other issues that are being raised, that are being talked about, that are the so-called hot topics of the day that are really important. Um, so, and some of the things that we really want to discuss and get into in Soul Science Ministries as we look at kind of new terrain within the cultural landscape as well as within social consciousness and what people are dealing with right now in terms of how they're thinking about reality itself and purpose and meaning and all that. Um, we want to discuss some issues that are relevant to our experiences today and how we're experiencing all aspects of life, including business and medicine and science and technology and the like, and everything else in between. Um, so, as a lot of growing discussions around the nature of consciousness and consciousness's implications for these other aspects, particularly by various gurus, New Age thinkers, cosmic consciousness thinkers, you might call them, which are kind of dominating a lot of discussions and kind of permeating itself in a lot of different areas of life. We as theists, especially, and as Christians, need to think about these things well. There's a lot that we can learn from the New Age, the cosmic consciousness gurus. There's a lot of bad stuff out there. There's a lot of pseudoscience. There's a lot of other pseudo thinking out there, not very good thinking out there, but also there's a lot of stuff that's really antithetical to Christianity itself and how it conceives of the soul and the soul's relationship to spirituality more generally. So I want to talk to you about that. Here we discuss the depths of human experience as well as the mysteries that connect us to something greater. So today I want to dive into one of the more profound topics of the soul in relation to spirituality more generally. What is the soul and how does it guide our spiritual journey? I think it does. In fact, uh, there's many things that we can learn from spiritual gurus of the day, even if we depart on many important things or more important or essential aspects of how they conceive of the soul in relation to spirituality. So let's think about some of these mysteries together. The soul does point us to a set of mysteries, and importantly so. And so it's important to think about that. What is exactly is the soul? Different philosophical and spiritual traditions define the soul differently. There are different perspectives on the soul. Some describe the soul as an immortal essence of a person, or at least an immaterial essence of the person, the immaterial core of the person, the very thing that makes the person that person. I certainly agree with that. Immortality is often closely assigned to the soul, or it has a close resemblance or close relationship to the soul in terms of the meaning and definition. Others define the soul as something that has a spark of divine within us. Others see it again as the core of consciousness and being itself. All these are arguably somewhat interrelated, overlapping concepts within different philosophical and religious traditions. But one fundamental question arises, is the soul separate from the body or an intrinsic part of it? Um, So this is an important question, and there are lots of different and complicated answers to that question. Of course, questions that I've dealt with in other places and in other contexts, as well as particularly in academic contexts. But um, this whole question about the nature of separation between soul and body is an important one that needs clarification and nuance. There are different dualistic traditions that follow Plato and Descartes that do state or affirm or at least suggest the independence of the soul from the body. And I think there is probably some truth in that, that the soul is independent from the body, or at least the part that stands below the body and its parts. And it can exist apart from bodily properties or attributes itself. There are others, on the other hand, that are often called more holistic views, such as those that are found within more indigenous cultures and traditions that have their own religious perspectives that even are more animistic in nature, that see the soul as inseparably intertwined with the physical form or the physical body itself. And they see it as maybe even an essential ingredient of the body itself. And so there is no sense in which it is actually or possibly separable from the body itself. But regardless of the interpretation, the soul represents the deepest aspect of who we are, the essence, the very essence of the being itself. So spirituality and the soul, how does spirituality connect with the concept of the soul? This is an important question. For many, spirituality is the journey of discovering and aligning with their soul. And there's certainly a long tradition of this within a wide variety of religious traditions that affirm the soul or think about the soul in this way, that there's this kind of internal journey or this looking inward or this turning inward. Certainly that is common within the New Age world, cosmic consciousness. It's certainly common. This kind of idea you find in Eastern traditions, religious traditions. And to some extent, you do find it even in Christianity to varying degrees. This whole idea that Plato talks about in his dialogues about the turn inward and finding sort of God there. Not that you are identified with God, not that you are necessarily the same as God. Certainly in a Christian view, you're not. There's still a creator-creature distinction, but there is something about turning inward in kind of utter transparency where you kind of, that's where you meet the divine, that's where you meet God. And so you certainly see that within the Christian tradition to some degree, and in some ways appropriating that more Platonic idea, but in a different way, taking it up in a different way. So we can talk about that further, and I plan to in other contexts, because this is a really important and fascinating topic that's even being kind of retrieved now in more explicit ways, more conscious ways. Religious beliefs and practice often center around the soul as being that kind of inner self and where we find harmony and balance with the rest of the world. That's an important idea itself in terms of spirituality. How do we find inner balance or harmony with the world or peace? And what we're talking about, all these concepts are kind of related to this notion of the soul. In Christianity, the soul is seen as arguably an immortal being or essence. Of course, we need to define immortality. I mean, there's different takes on what immortality is and how we take it that the soul is actually immortal. But the destination of the soul, the destiny, you might say, is union or communion with God. In contrast to, say, Hinduism and Buddhism, where the soul encounters some kind of reincarnation, and that's just part of the soul story, that the soul goes through these cycles of reincarnation, of striving for liberation, and then unity with the oneness, with the divine itself, with the one being itself. And different spiritual paths, journeys offer unique interpretations of the soul and how it is that it finds purpose and place in the world. Experiencing the soul. What do we mean by an experience of the soul? Or what do we mean? What does it mean to experience the soul? So oftentimes, and this is a common when we think about analytic philosophical discussions about the mind-body relation, we're talking about the experience of the soul as being an experience itself, which is often tied to the mind or the soul itself. There is this experience of what it is like to experience myself and, of course, myself in relation to things in the world. And this is often associated with the hard problem of consciousness. But it's this idea of the inner experience that seems to transcend sort of external knowledge, public knowledge. It transcends, and in some ways, arguably, some might even say it transcends rational thought. It doesn't contradict necessarily rational thought. There's the distinction there, but it does transcend rational thought. The soul connects deeply with our emotions, with intuition, with creativity, with tapping into that more subjective side of what and who you are and what and who another person is that makes that person, that distinctive characteristic and contribution that they make to the world that is different and cannot be reducible or explained by way of science or empirical means. It is something that we connect to by way of the soul and having a deep kind of connection with ourselves, with our intuitions, our creativity, our emotional states, and how it is that our emotional states provide a lens for perspective on the world, where we experience profound moments of clarity, joy, inspiration, and those sorts of things, where we have illumination. These are, you might say, arguably glimpses of the soul itself. And certainly there are certain practices that have been encouraged throughout different philosophical and religious traditions in order to experience more enlightenment, you might say, or at least illumination, more clarity of the soul, more clarity of mind, more clarity of the self, a clarity of the self concept, and these sorts of things. Of course, many gurus today will encourage practicing something like meditation or mindfulness or journaling. And certainly as Christians, there's to some extent, these are kind of normal things that we should think about in terms of we have these practices. They're different. And of course, we need to make some distinctions and not kind of roll them all up together as one thing. But in the Christian tradition, we have practices as well of contemplation, as well as even meditation, in some, especially in some of the traditions that are more uh, inclined more toward mysticism, or even not necessarily even mysticism, but inclined toward uh, more just the contemplative traditions itself and the practices therein. Of course, journaling can help us. I used to journal for many years in my early 20s. It was a great therapeutic practice and it helped bring clarity to my mind, my thought, helped me make decisions in life. It's a fantastic practice. It helps us quiet the mind of those kinds of distractions. You know, those distractions that you hear at night, right? As you're trying to go to sleep, you have so many questions in your mind, so much information to process that it's hard to actually even go to sleep. It's hard to turn that mind off. So these things help. These sorts of practices help with that and help us get in tune with our soul, our inner self, peace, uh, balance, as well as connecting ourselves so that ourselves are not so distracted and so consumed with things that they have to deal with and think about. Well, what about this whole idea of the soul's journey? What do we mean by the soul's journey? That's kind of an ethereal concept. It's fairly abstract. What do we mean by this concept of the soul's journey as being a central theme in many of the spiritual traditions or religious traditions, of which it is? There's different meanings about journey. You hear journey even today within evangelical circles about this sort of my journey in life, my religious journey, my religious path. And it's a very general expression that can often get conflated with different religious meanings and religious ideas or religious emphases that may not be Christian all the time, and other times it may be. But it is certainly a general idea that refers to this kind of inner kind of path where 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 we experience our consciousness, we experience different projects that we have in life, we experience. It's really highlighting that kind of the internal life and how we order the soul itself, because the soul does have a structure to it, and it has good and bad paths. It has good and bad habits, you might say. It has healthier habits mentally, uh, emotionally, that lead us or steer us in different directions, as it were, and lead us to a place of contemplation, illumination, peacefulness, harmony, balance, etc., etc. The soul's journey can also refer in some spiritual traditions to this notion of reincarnation and recalling, or as Plato would say, recollecting the idea of the past. Well, what about the purpose of the journey? It depends on which religious tradition we're talking about. There are different purposes to journey, and sometimes these things get conflated, even in our own personal experiences, as we're being interrupted by other religious ideas, or we're being influenced by other ideas that are out there that are actually shaping us and forming us in distinct ways. Some is enlightenment. Some is a higher, gaining some sort of higher power. Some is like, well, some sort of continuity beyond the physical realm with the real life, with the transcendent divine life, you might say. And some uh, would say that union with God, or in the Christian tradition, historically, it's been um, the beatific vision, or even what the tradition is called, the Western tradition is called deification, or theosis. So here's a question: living a soulful life, because the soul really is a meaningful term, and it's more meaningful than we often realize or give it credit for. And even some today still use the term, but they mean it in a very sentimental way, or they mean it in an abstract way. They don't actually believe in a soul. And I think there's something that's lost when they start talking that way or start believing those things. But living a soulful life, how do we integrate our soul into our daily lives in terms of like making every aspect of our life more soulful, or soulful meaning, and uh, aligning our soul with our activities and projects in life? Well, this requires deep work in the soul of orienting the soul the right way, integrating our purposes and our values, and aligning what we really believe with what we're really doing in life. About infusing our actions with intention and meaning in everything that we do, being full of meaning, and every moment of the day being taking seeds of it, and imbuing it with intentional meaning, and making every second and minute count every day, so that you live a very meaningful life. Um, the soul is closely tied to various expressions and emotions that are tied to our value sets, and what it is that triggers us and makes us motivated, what helps us move along in the world. So by cultivating these qualities in every aspect of our life, and the things that we do, and the functions that we perform, and the projects that we're about, we make it more meaningful. And in other words, we make it more soulful, you might say. And this helps us to live in harmony with our soul and to connect it with the things that we do in life. The soul is a guide, in a sense, picking up on the Platonic turn, the turn inward. Um, reflecting, just reflecting and bringing it to a close, reflecting on that profound connection between the soul and spirituality. The soul isn't just an abstract concept. It's not just a sentimental idea, even, and it's not something that is an expression of religion, uh, uh, untethered from the world, and emotions that are untied to something in reality. It's not just sentimental fluff without any grounding to it. So I invite you to explore it and explore your soul. What does it mean to you, and how does it influence your spirituality, and how does it influence life itself, as we enter into this journey together on the soul and spirituality? So please discuss, follow along, uh, subscribe, like, uh, Created Souls as well, Soul Science Ministries. Follow me on YouTube as well as on social media. Follow and subscribe, and let's continue the discussion. Until next time, keep seeking, keep growing, keep connecting with the essence of who you are. Thanks.